Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Love in the Time of Corona with our sacred conversations, which, as you know, I think we're in week 7 of these conversations, as well as week 7 of our physical distancing. As many of you know, we invite guests to our digital meeting house to meet with us so that we can tap into these wonderful community wisdom keepers who are a natural resource for our community at this time. And I am delighted to be hosting this week and have a chance to speak with Dr. Alicia Farrell. Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you. Hi.
You are a wisdom keeper in this time, working with folks I know of all ages. I think your website says from teens at the age of 13 up until 98. So, and helping us, I think today we'll have a chance to talk about what hopefully you're seeing out there in talking with folks, and how in the midst of all this we can continue to foster well-being, and what some of those resources might be. Before we get started, I wanted to share a little bit about Dr. Alicia Farrell's bio, and then we'll get into our conversation. So welcome again, and welcome to all of you. Dr. Farrell is an accomplished cognitive psychologist, a former university professor and national keynote speaker, and also a consultant and in private practice for many years. I know that you also bring a decade, I think, of corporate experience, as well as expertise working with individuals and couples, parents, and families. So you, I see here, have expertise in helping parents with problem solving, managing addiction, and the growth of adolescent brains and social emotional development, in addition to dealing with anxiety and successful ways of being in relationship with one another. So your website has some wonderful information on it, which we'll share with folks later, but I'd love to get into this with you now. Of course, we're in this unprecedented time for all of us, and for parents and families. It is a particular, unique struggle as many are managing not only kids at home, but homeschooling, as well as juggling jobs and the rest of it. So I wonder if you could start us off by sharing a little bit about some of the struggles and challenges that you're hearing.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Laura, for having me. I just want to start by saying that I feel very blessed to be on the front lines, the emotional front lines, during an experience like this. Not only am I'm just so fortunate to be able to support other people, but I'm also very fortunate to be learning from everyone. And I think that is something that we're all doing right now. And in my practice, it's very concentrated because I see about 40 people a week, and I'm really connected to the communities around here. So I'm learning an awful lot myself as we go along this journey together. It's been interesting. What I've seen in my practice has really shifted over the course of the last 6 or 7 weeks. I think this week this is the 7th week, right?
I was counting today. Yeah.
So it's interesting, we all kind of went into quick survival mode early on, where we felt hopeful. We felt like, okay, we can do this. And people were very, very attuned to looking at the positive side of things, and really finding their grit and their resilience. And then in the last couple of weeks, I noticed in my practice that people really started to hit the wall. They started to feel as if, I'm trying, but I'm having some bad days where I just can't seem to get in touch with my positive side or my hope and this is all very normal, very natural to happen when you're going through adversity. What's so unusual about this experience for all of us is that, first of all, we're all experiencing it, which is not normally the case when we're looking at being in difficult times in our lives. Those times can often alienate us from other people. But in this case, we're experiencing this not only in these small communities, but all over the world. So we have a lot of connection available to us, whether it's direct or whether it's perceived, just knowing that other people are struggling in very similar ways. And that has been something that people have really started to grab hold of in the last couple of weeks. It's been actually really fascinating to watch people get in touch with their grit and their resilience and realize what is most important to them and what is it that nurtures them, their souls, and to get to a place like we have in the last several weeks where we've had to find that for ourselves. And people are, I'm amazed. People are struggling, and I'm just like everybody else. I definitely have my moments and I have my days. But all in all, we're sorting it out. We're all on this ride, this emotional ride that we wake up and we grab hold of every day, and we kind of buckle up and get through another one. But we're doing it. We're doing it.
Yeah, and I think this is an overused phrase, but it's certainly apt. The notion of this new normal. I think this isn't, we aren't going to be going back anytime soon to the way things were, right? There's going to be a rolling changes in terms of when we can all be together again in a physical space. But I know that from my own family and people I work with, that I think the sense of struggle has, on the one hand, increased because it feels never ending.
Yeah.
And the other hand, digging deep, an opportunity to dig deep, maybe create some new routines, find a way to communicate differently, which has been quite beautiful. That's been such a light. And so along with that, what do you see as some strategies that you see folks tapping into to tap into that resiliency?
Yeah, so let me first just say that I do feel as if there's just so much opportunity right now for all of us, and will continue to be enormous opportunity to rethink all kinds of aspects of life. Going into this situation, we were not doing well as a culture. And I've seen it in my practice the last 20 years. I've really watched people, as life has become in some ways far more comfortable for a lot of us, it's also become far more challenging and difficult emotionally for many. And we prior to this happening, we were seeing exponential levels of anxiety and depression in our children.
Yes.
People had disconnected, even though we thought we were connected. Because of technology, we've really disconnected in terms of this kind of connection, which is substantive connection, meaningful connection. And so then we go into this pandemic that is separating us physically, but it's bringing us together emotionally and spiritually and all these other ways that we were not getting before this. So I do want to just impress upon everybody that as difficult as this is and as tragic as it is and the loss that's going on, there's also this amazing joy available to us. And it's not going to be every moment that's silly. And what we need to move emotionally in and out of the pain and suffering and the frustration and the struggle to the joy, and then back to the pain and suffering, the struggle. And that's a really important coping mechanism to move. It isn't that we jump over our emotions. So it's not as if, oh, just think positively, everything will be okay. And well, that doesn't work because we're all experiencing intense emotion and low levels of anxiety and high levels of anxiety and depression. And I mean, this is triggering a lot of emotional issues for even the most healthy of individuals.
Yeah.
So one really important way of dealing with an ongoing, indefinite situation like this is to kind of flow. You got to find your flow. Try not to get too stuck in an emotion or too stuck on a topic. And what we call that is acceptance. So acceptance isn't, it's not saying, oh, I give up or I give in, or it is actually looking at the truth and accepting it, accepting that we're in this situation and there's so much we cannot do about it. And for humans, that's a really difficult place to be, because we're used to, if we're struggling, or if, our fight or flight, even at a low level, is triggered, we want to act, we want to do something about it. And there isn't anything we can do to affect the long term or to make this come to an end. All we can do is manage it every day. So just working on accepting, and acceptance isn't a firm state. It's something that you move in and out of. You have to find it. You have to go back to it. So how do you do that? Right? So then we come up with all these other ideas about how to do it. And almost every single one of them has to do with connection. It has to do with connection to self, connection to your family, connection to your community, connection to your God, if you believe in that. Just connection is what allows us to keep our feet on the ground and to find acceptance. And it takes work, right? It takes work to do that.
Yeah. And I would imagine that there is a difference between acceptance and what I was just thinking of as giving up or giving in.
Oh, yeah.
And what are we accepting? Well, this level of uncertainty that we're living with.
Yeah, so you're so right about that. So what we're accepting is whatever it is that we know to be true right now. And that has to do with the way that we feel. It has to do with the facts. It has to do with the fact that we have to accept that nobody knows. Nobody knows very much of anything right now. We're not going to know a lot until we're looking back on it, because it's so novel. It's so unprecedented for all of us.
Yeah.
What people tend to do, and this is just a very typical human reaction to fear, is to go into the future and try to anticipate, try to assume, try to figure things out. And that's not a safe place to be right now, because that doesn't exist. First of all, we're not there. Second of all, we don't have enough information now to even be able to go into the future and understand when this is going to come to an end, or what it means, or what this virus even is. There's so many things we don't know, and it's so typical and normal for us to want to know and to want to figure it out. So we create anxiety for ourselves by going into the future and trying to protect ourselves from something, from the threat, this invisible threat, that we can't possibly do that to ourselves or for ourselves.
Right. One of the things that I know you have talked about with parents is what you call boots on the ground parenting. And I wondered, in my conversations with parents, I hear an awful lot of exhaustion, wanting to get this right, worried about kids being on computers 10, 12 hours a day, let alone trying to have your own home office and juggle those demands. So you might, I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that and how you see that happening now for parents at home.
Yeah, gosh, I feel for the parents. And I feel for the kids. I'll share some information with you about the kids in my practice and what they're saying to me as well. In terms of the boots on the ground parenting, when in relation to this pandemic, my suggestion to parents is to take a deep breath and realize that they can actually have more control of how their family goes through this experience than they may be implementing. And what I mean by that is life cannot continue the way it was, and our children's lives cannot continue the way it was. And there's a lot of fear with my parents around their kids falling behind.
Yes.
Their kids not being able to manage their schedules and being emotionally fragile, not being able to handle the stress and the anxiety of the expectations on them. And what I want to say to the parents is, first of all, you're going to discover over the course of this how incredibly strong and resilient your children actually are. Because we've been overparenting now for quite a long time. And in doing that, we've robbed our children of the ability to build up their grit and to realize that they are strong and they are resilient and they are capable of handling adversity. So you want to, as a parent, and this is very, very personal. This isn't what I'm about to suggest is not a formula for every single family. You have to figure out for your own family and for your own children what's best. But my suggestion to parents is to ask themselves, how do we as a family want to go through this? Do we want to go through this experience stressed out with the kids on the computer 10 to 12 hours a day and all the strife that's developing between the parents and the kids, trying to keep them motivated and trying to keep them on task? And or do we want to back that off a little bit and actually give the kids a little bit of academic breathing room, recognizing that, you have to get some of this stuff done, and we this is a necessity to keep you engaged and keep you learning. But we don't have to become this whirling dervish of a family in our own houses where we're not having time together and we're all stressed out and we're all angry at each other and we're all frustrated and we're all sad and confused. So I just, and it's not a popular suggestion, because I know that the school systems they're doing the best they can as well, and the teachers are overwhelmed, and they don't know how much work to give the kids, and they don't know. It's all so new. But what I hear from the kids, Laura, is heartbreaking. What I hear from the kids is that they feel like their feelings are being disregarded in the face of performance. So the kids are saying to me, I am struggling, and yet I'm still expected to spend all this time online and to get all my worksheets done and to do this. And now, granted, it's different at every age. The teenagers should really be in a position where they should be handling this at this point relatively well because of their level of maturity. The middle schoolers, not so much. The elementary, not at all. I mean, some of them can handle it. Most of them are really struggling. And then they get the pressure put on them by their parents, and their parents are not supposed to be their teachers. They're not supposed to be their administrators, right?
Right.
And
yeah, and I know it's exhausting for the whole family trying to make that happen. Those school systems who have managed, like, for example, what I know about in Old Lyme, sort of project-based learning, so that it can ebb and flow a little bit more easily with a child's interests and limited time on the computer.
That's wonderful.
But it's daunting. It's daunting for parents. It's daunting for the kids. It's daunting for teachers. So, how to set boundaries around that work time so that there can be family space and to get outside and
peer time. So that's the other
peer
thing.
Time, which is such a loss.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's really, for the kids at all ages, that's the most painful thing about this situation. Because a kid's job, in addition, obviously, to their academics or learning, is to find their identity, to work on their identity, to practice, to experiment, to interact, to connect with individuals that understand them, which is their peers. And that's the other thing I'm hearing from kids of all ages, is that it's so hard for them. And I think it's easy for us as adults to think that the kids are getting peer time when they're on a Zoom call with all of their classmates, but they're not. They're there to learn, and they're not there physically together, which just makes a huge difference. Even if they're not interacting in a classroom, just to be physically with one another and to have that 5 minutes in between classes or whatever, they're really feeling very sad and disconnected. And we need to balance all of this and not get too hyper-focused on the kids performing academically at this point in time. I guess that's bottom line what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
They will be fine. They will, they'll catch up. They'll not be behind. They will be okay. So
letting go of some of that, it creates a little more space and opportunity for
letting go of
academic stress.
Unrealistic expectations, and giving the kids a little bit of space and connecting with the children on their emotions, how they're actually feeling, because they feel like they're getting the message that they should the expectation is that they should just be able to handle this as if it's okay. Now you're just online, and now you're in the house, and now we're doing this, and now we're doing that. And it's so important to connect with your children on an emotional level, and just spend some time talking to them about how they feel.
I've been impressed with some of the activities that families are doing to have that downtime together and have fun together. Whether it's board game nights or sitting around the fire pit outside, or having some music and singing together, or dancing together, or cooking together. Those kinds of fun activities
Yeah, and that's what I'm hearing from the parents is that they feel incredibly stressed, but also incredibly fortunate to have this time with their kids.
Right.
And a lot of parents haven't spent this amount of time around their kids since they were babies.
Well, that is
And
true because we're usually so busy following the schedule and school and
yeah,
sports and whatever lessons and usually drive so many things. So that's such an opportunity
it's
that
such
we
a
have here.
huge opportunity. Yeah, and to set aside, find time to set aside the expectations and just be present with your kids and do like you were suggesting, all these fun things and adjust your expectations that hey, it's not going to, even when you're doing those fun things, sometimes it's going to be stressful, sometimes you're going to be in conflict, and we all are at this point. We're getting really sick of each other.
That's true.
And that's okay too, and sick of ourselves. I'm thinking about the next blog I want to do is about self-distancing, like how do you distance from
Ah,
yourself? Because I don't know
that's a
about
good
everybody
one.
else, but I am sick and tired of myself.
That's great. I like that one. That sounds like a really something I could certainly relate to as well as some others. Um, one of the things that I was wondering about what are some of those behaviors that maybe parents, grandparents, loved ones could be on the lookout for. Um, I'm thinking of teens and adolescents in particular in terms of um, withdrawal, anxiety. What are some of those things? Because self-isolating in the house.
Yeah. So let's talk about the difference between stress and anxiety.
Okay.
And then we'll talk a little bit about what to look for. So
Okay.
when you're thinking about stress and anxiety, you want to think about it on a spectrum. So stress, anxiety is here, anxiety disorder is over here.
Yeah.
So stress is normally a reaction to a situation that we can do something about. So when you're on this side of the spectrum, what we call stress, you
Hmm.
get a low level physiological reaction to a situation. Let's say you're a teen and you have a chemistry exam coming up and you feel like you haven't quite studied hard enough for it. You might be stressed, and you might actually be chronically stressed for the week ahead of time and maybe feel a little bit of anxiety as well. But the point is that it's a normal reaction to a situation that you can actually do something about. Either in the moment or after the fact, learn from it and handle it differently the next time. As you start to move on that spectrum into anxiety, anxiety is actually an irrational response to a situation. So stress tends to be a logical response, a rational response to a situation. And anxiety is an irrational response to a situation. So, what's tricky about right now is that we are all experiencing low levels of anxiety, whether you have anxiety or not, because we're faced with a threat that we can't do anything about. And we don't even know how dangerous it is or how ubiquitous it is. We don't know how to respond. And so our systems are reacting in this fight or flight, this low level fight or flight.
Hmm.
Sometimes over the course of chronic high levels of stress and anxiety, we can develop what would be considered more of a disorder. And a disorder is when you're reacting to normal everyday things in irrational ways, and not only in your behavior, but your physical reaction. So your heart races, you're short of breath, you sweat, you have difficult time concentrating, because your body is being flooded with these hormones, this cortisol and adrenaline and dopamine at high levels, and it's making it difficult for you to actually perform, to actually uh, be normal under normal circumstances. So the kinds of things that you want to look for in the teenagers these days, and what you're looking for when you're trying to see anxiety, is that these symptoms appear to be chronic. So they're happening every day, all, in and out all day throughout the course of weeks. It's going to be very normal for your children right now to have days where they're anxious, to have moments where they're anxious. Those, you want to see that those are coming and going, coming and going. If they're coming and going, your child is coping with them, and they're learning tools to cope with them. If you notice that your child gets trapped in these reactions, these anxious reactions, and it really starts to impact what you perceive to be their quality of life every day, that's when you want to sort of, keep your eyes open. So the kinds of things to look for: poor sleep, too much sleep, not enough sleep, difficulty getting to sleep, difficulty staying asleep, difficulty getting up in the morning. Physical reactions, like always has a stomach ache, gets up every day, I don't feel good, I've got a headache, I have a stomach ache, I feel kind of achy, I'm just so tired all the time. Things like that. Overreacting to small things that normally they wouldn't react that way to. So they lose. You're playing a family game, and they lose a card game, and they throw the cards, and they have a fit, and they yell, and and they go to their room. Overreaction, right? Irrational reaction to that. That's a sign that their system is kind of building up this stress and anxiety, and it's finding outlets that don't make sense. They're coming out sideways. Difficulty concentrating. So your teen is normally a relatively good student, and they seem to have adjusted to the online really well, but all of a sudden they can't seem to get their work done, and they can't seem to sit down for long periods of time. You're having a conversation with them and they can't concentrate. That's also a really good sign that perhaps they're experiencing higher levels of stress or anxiety to keep an eye on. So these kinds of things that become persistent, that's when you want to really start to pay attention. Isolation, like you said. So maybe they're spending all day in their room. Not good. Even as a teenager, they spend much more time in there. But in this time, we need to get them out of their rooms. We need to get them some exercise, get them moving around, get them interacting. Even if they don't feel like it, it should be a requirement for them to come out of their room every now and again. So that gives you some idea.
Yeah, that's really helpful. One of the challenges, as you mentioned earlier, is this loss of friendship time. And for kids to keep, they're not spending time with their friends physically. And I was reminded of, I participated in a birthday car parade over the weekend. And the joy on everyone's face, adults and kids, because we got to physically see one another. And that has been such a loss, a hunger. And so how are kids and families keeping friendships alive with and growing in the midst of this, that you have seen being helpful in terms of well-being?
Yeah, this is challenging because a lot of the ways that the kids are used to connecting and are connecting now are over social media,
Right,
and the internet, and gaming, and of course the parents, understandably, are concerned about that because they've spent all this time already on the computer doing their schoolwork, and now they're on the computer again.
Right.
And so I think there's a difference in the way that the different sexes are dealing with it.
Hmm.
So the boys tend to want to get online with their friends and play video games. And some parents that I'm working with have very strict guidelines in place for that, and they're only allowed a certain amount of time, and only after they've finished their work, and all that kind of stuff. Other parents have become, over the course of the last 7 weeks, far more permissive about it, because they feel like we just got to let this child do what they want to do sometimes, because we're constantly on top of them to get their work done. I think it, in that case, has a lot to do with the kind of child that you have. If you have a child that you think has a tendency towards being a little obsessive or a little compulsive, you might want to have tighter constraints around that sort of thing. If you have a child that self-regulates relatively well, and they seem to be managing their responsibilities on their own relatively well, then maybe you give them some free rein and see how they do. So, with boys really, even teenage boys, they're not really interested in having conversation. That's not necessarily developmentally where they're at.
Right.
And so they're not necessarily going to be like some of the girls are. And I know I'm stereotyping everybody, and I'm sensitive to gender identification and all of that sort of thing. But for the sake of simplicity, the girls tend to be more social that way, more verbal.
Mm-hmm.
And the boys tend to be more action-oriented, action-based in their connection. So I think you have to honor that as parents as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a little more challenging with the boys than it is with the girls. The girls are going to find all kinds of different creative ways of connecting with one another.
Mm-hmm.
They may be, baking cookies and dropping them off. They may be drawing pictures for each other. They may be having conversations on a Zoom call.
Mm-hmm.
Boys are going to play video games.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
I don't know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
playing. Some families have figured out how the kids could play across the street from one another.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually have them come outside and stay on their respective sides of the street, if you have a neighborhood that would allow that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I've seen bike riding too.
yeah.
Kids are bike riding at a distance, and as the weather gets better, that's a way to, as well as walking
Yeah.
together. Well, that's really helpful. Looking forward to the spring, to the summer, not knowing how it's going to unfold. What gives you hope looking forward? What is sustaining you as you look towards the summer in terms of helping families and kids with their emotional lives?
Well, philosophically, Laura, I would have to say that I grew up pretty hard knocks. My dad was an admiral in the Navy. I went to 10 schools in 12 years all over the world, and it was a challenging childhood. It's wonderful in retrospect, but it was very difficult. And I know from personal experience, having grown up that way and having had a full adult life, which we've all had very difficult times in our lives and very good times in our lives, that our instinct is to survive. That's what we do. That's what we're programmed to do. And so that's where I try to find that perspective every day. with my clients. I help them find it, and I find it myself every day, that we're going to be okay. And change is an inevitable and healthy aspect of life. And this summer is going to be different than last summer for everyone. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be bad or it has to be sad.
Mm-hmm.
We have already seen some amazing innovation in our towns and in the country and within our families. Everybody is thinking outside the box. They're getting creative. They're trying new things. It's so, I mean, just as I'm talking to you right now, I get goosebumps because it's so exciting.
Yeah.
The opportunity is so exciting. So what will this summer bring? What will the fall bring? I mean, they're saying, oh, we're going to have another another episode of this through the flu season, and who knows, they don't know for sure. But the point is, we're going to figure it out. And we have to just stay open to the change. It's time. It's time for this change to happen. And it's sad and it's unfortunate that it has to happen this way. But we weren't getting the message. We were not, as human beings on this planet, we were not getting the message that we were unhappy, we were disconnected, we were overwhelmed, overworked. Our values and our priorities were all out of whack. Our parenting has gotten completely convoluted to the point where we don't even know what we're doing as parents anymore, and our kids are suffering. And I know I'm painting this picture because I've been speaking all over Connecticut for the last 20 years on topics as they've been on the bleeding edge that I've seen in my practice. And they've all developed into really significant issues in our culture where, and maybe, just maybe, this summer will be yet another wonderful opportunity for all of us to do things differently, to slow down, to simplify our lives when it comes to what we know is important to us, and put our energy into that this summer, whatever that is for you. Because that if we don't, this is my biggest fear, Laura, is that we're going to get through this and we're not going to learn. We will not have learned what we could be learning that will improve our lives. And I'm terrified that we're going to blow through this experience, come out the other side, and within 2 months we're all going to be back where we were before, in this competitive world where the values are convoluted and the connection is few and far between.
I think, of course, there is that risk, of course. But as you were talking about the incredible arc of resiliency that you have seen in families, and as we have been introduced to all these creative ways that people are keeping connected, sowing seeds of kindness, taking care of their neighbors, feeding people who are more vulnerable than themselves, helping out at giving out masks or giving out food, and engaging as whole families in that kind of thing, or so it's really an intergenerational effort. I certainly see much of the people that I have an opportunity to know really taking this time to heart and finding a way to be different, and to really show what we're calling love in the time of Corona, and have that kind of new habits of the heart going forward. And one parent recently was telling me about this fabulous children's book, and I'm called What If?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sorry, the author's name is escaping me at the moment, but, what if things fall apart again? What if everyone gets sick, kind of going down that road? And then what if we can take care of the earth in a whole new way?
Yeah.
What if air, water, and soil will thrive again because we are changed? What if? And so kind of dreaming into that in our relationships, so that's what gives me hope, how I see
Yeah.
those kinds of practices happening around us and across the world, that we're all literally in this together.
Mm.
Some of us having a harder time than others, but I think the more we can see beyond our own particular struggles, the more that kind of compassion and heart opening, those opportunities can make these changes real and take
Beautifully
root.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Um,
I was working with a young man last week, and we were trying to come up. He's 19, and we were trying to come up with an analogy for the state of the world and the situation that we're in. And we were talking about it, and we came up with this vision of a tapestry. And imagine, I don't know if you've ever been to a museum where they have these tapestries that are they're just enormous. They're huge. They're bigger than a room.
right.
And when you're standing in front of a tapestry like that, you can't see it. You can't see the whole thing. All you can see is what's right in front of you. So we were talking about how this situation is very much like a tapestry that's so big that you can't see it. And a lot of it we don't even know. We don't even know it yet. So what the choice that we all have to make is, where are we going to look on that tapestry? Are we going to look right in front of us? And some people need to do that. Some people need to put their nose up against the tapestry and just look at themselves, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And other people need to step back a little bit and take a look at the bigger picture. And other people need to look up at the right and look at, so, but that, when we're looking for control, because right now we all feel like we don't have a lot of control, one of the things we can control is where we're looking. Because, and where we look is going to influence how we feel and what we do. So if you're spending most of your day looking at the news, that's a piece of the tapestry that you're choosing to look at, and that's going to influence how you're experiencing this pandemic. If you're choosing to look at your family today, this is it. I'm going to look at my family today. That's the piece of the tapestry that's important to me today. Then that's where you'll find your joy, is right there in front of you. We thought that was pretty.
Yeah, that's a beautiful image to go forward with. Yeah, and to think about the choices that we have, to look where we look, or to spend our time, and how there are certain restrictions that we all are experiencing right now, but we always have choices as to what we're going to spend our time with and what we're going to allow in terms of, I was thinking about that because I have one of my nephews who's 8 is very precocious and very aware of that map that shows where COVID is. And so, so I've seen the challenges that that his parents have had in terms of, kind of introducing other ways of limiting that interest and anxiety. So so that it doesn't turn into kind of a paranoia.
Mhm. Yeah, can we talk about that for a second?
Yes.
Like how parents can talk to their children. First of all, if possible, and I know this is challenging depending on how old your child is, try to limit their exposure to the media. So that would mean maybe you don't have the news on at night on the television in the common area. I mean, kids are like sponges. They're going to pick up
Right.
on everything. And they're often going to pick up on the negative things because that's also just naturally who we are as humans. We want to protect ourselves, so we're going to listen for the danger, particularly if we know it's there. Uh, the other thing, when you're talking with your children, don't assume that they know something or they don't know something. Instead of trying to educate them, ask them questions so that you can better understand what they're feeling and thinking and what they know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because what we might be tempted to do as parents is to jump in and assume that they know about this, or their fear is around that, and we start addressing those things without really checking in with them, and we create something they didn't even think of being afraid of. so if you have a precocious 8-year-old, ask him questions. If he's looking at the map and he's studying the map and he's always talking about the map, you might say, what is so interesting about that for you? And how does it feel when you look at the map? Does it feel good when you look at the map? And if it doesn't, you can choose not to. You could choose not to look at it. So just working with our children based on where they let us know they're at. Don't make an assumption around that.
Right.
If you're talking to teenagers, they're exploring their intellect, and they're in a very black and white time in their lives where they see the answer to everything. They see everything as being very good and bad and yes and no, and they see it as the world is black and white. So they're going to come up with some things that you're going to want to correct them on, because they'll say, well, why don't we just do this? This is stupid. Why don't we just, blah, 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 blah. And as a parent, you may have a tendency to come across as the authority in that conversation and say, well, really, it can't be that way because of this or that. Before you go in that direction, draw them out some more. Ask them questions instead of planting that information. You can always, of course, educate your children and guide them. But before you do that, give them an opportunity to explore for themselves. Try not to shame them for their thoughts, even if they're extreme, or judge them for their thoughts. They feel that. What they want more than anything in the world during this time and every time is to just be heard and understood. They don't want to be corrected all the time. So they could be completely, off the ledge with their suggestions, but that doesn't mean that you have to fix that. You have to correct that. You can just explore that with them in conversation and let them sort it out. Because the next day, they're going to feel differently. They're going to move through those feelings. They're going to see it from a different perspective. And then you can have a conversation with them about that too. So
Yeah, that's really helpful. That's really helpful. I'm aware of our time and the fact that I could keep asking you questions for another 3 hours, and I won't. But I am so grateful to you for carving out this time for us to talk through some of these questions and issues. Thank you for sharing your insights with us, your expertise. It's really been a pleasure.
Laura, thank you so much. This is such an honor for me to be on this call with you and to help your community. So I just appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. And I will also say that your website has some great information on it. So people can look for Alicia Farrell, Alicia Farrell. I think it is.
Yeah,
So
phd.com. Yeah.
So thank you for that. And I want to say thank you to all of you listening at home for spending this time with us. Please continue to be well, stay well, reach out in whatever way you need to. We're here and we love you and we miss you. So thank you again to Alicia Farrell for being with us today, and for all of you for spending time with us as well. Thanks so much, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.